So after 10 videos and quite a bit of work, this is confusing. It's not working very well. Uh-oh. Now I have no way to stop it, so now I'm in trouble. I'm gonna sprint up there and get it. So today I'm going to try to take this tank, which is empty. It's a 2,500 gallon water tank. I'm going to try to put it up on this pedestal, which I built over the last handful of videos. And I'm going to then try to set the plumbing up from a well pump that's a solar well about 200 feet away down the hill here. It's going to pump up to this location, fill that tank. And then I've got a 700 or 800 foot run of pipe down to the cabin location where we're going to hopefully have pressurized water from this tank when I'm done. It's going to be fun. This has taken a bunch of different videos to build all the different layers to get to this point, and this puts everything together into one system that should give us a drinking water supply for our cabin. Karen was with me today, and so she helped, and we just used some form wood and sort of a whole bunch of leverage and sort of pushing and pulling and nudging and grudging, and got the tank lifted up onto some 2x4s that we were able to then slide it across. And like I said, it's not super heavy, worked out pretty well, and it was actually kind of fun to do.
Together, our eyes are open wide, focused on the heat of the battle. We sing, we dance, we fight, and we love. The small things that we do, sharing a word or two, telling a story to a new friend. Open minds and open hearts. The news turned off, let's walk out the door.
All right, well, that was kind of fun. It was not the Egyptian pyramids by any means, but it was fun for two skinny little people to kind of figure out how to get this up here. So the tank's up here, it's centered, it fits just nicely inside the gravel there. And so I'm going to just do, I've got a really nice valve that came with it, this big banjo valve. I'm going to put that on there to close it down so that I can keep it plugged, but have control over it. And then I'll start building out my plumbing system here, but I'm going to put this in, and then I'll run down to the pump and turn on the well, and we'll start getting some water going in here just so we have something to work with and we can kind of rinse it out. There's a couple constraints here. We've got a lot of wild animals that mess with stuff. And so, for instance, the tank's got bear claw marks all over it. And we've been putting out game cameras, and the wires keep getting chewed up by the elk going scratch on them with their antlers, as far as we can tell. There's a lot of things that destroy things here, so we're going to try to harden this whole thing inside of a piece of PVC pipe. I'll show you how I do that. Plumb the tank. We also don't get a lot of freeze here, but it can get fairly cold, and it can, it can frost at night, but not get super deep cold. So I don't worry at all about the tank ever freezing. It'll get chilly, but it won't freeze. The plumbing and everything I want to kind of keep contained into a sort of a column. That column's removable if it ever fails, and I'll show you how I have it set up. All these joints, because I don't want to come back and fix any leaks, and every time I do this, I try just the Teflon tape, and then I end up going back and putting plumber's putty on it. Anyway, so I'm going to putty and tape each of these joints and start by putting in the main valve, and everything else is going to sort of hang off this, but you'll see that. And then we'll go down into the ground right in front of us here. I'll dig, I need a trench, and I'll dig that. I'm definitely not the right guy to give you a plumbing tutorial, so I'm going to focus kind of on why I set this up the way I did and not so much how. So I'll zoom through these different steps just so you can see how I'm assembling it, but stick to primarily the overall organization. Here I'm just using some parts to prepare a little temporary gadget to get the tank filling, and I'm going to replace all that with the system I'm putting in, but I want to get some water in the tank just so I can have something to test with, to make sure I'm not leaking, and also just to get the water going. It's kind of funny how each step of this water supply process involves a location, and then I less and less frequently visit the older locations as we move forward with the project down to the cabin, and I think eventually we'll almost never come back here. But I'm heading back to the well, and it's kind of gotten overgrown, so I had to kind of fight my way back into it. But the well is here, and I just need to turn it on and see that it comes on, and when you flip it on, it takes just a second to kind of open up and get going, and then it shows a pump status that means it's up and running. And so I'll start filling the tank. Well, that's pretty cool. I'm back up at the tank, and I don't know if you can hear it, but it sounds sort of like an elephant peeing, whatever that sounds like. But the tank is going to start filling now, and I can use that to kind of flush the system out a little bit when I'm working here, and just to verify that it still works. It's been a minute since we had that pump on, and we did all the trenching. We haven't run the water through there or anything, and so it's kind of neat to see it coming through underground. I'm sure it's staying pretty cool because it's coming straight underground all the way up, and dumping into the tank. And we'll start filling this here, and we'll kind of get an eye. It's late in the day today, so it's not going to get a whole lot more sun, but we'll get an eye on how much it's filling in a daily way, and also see if it's running the well low down there, which it's got that sensor in there to turn it off if it does, and it'll recharge overnight. I'm pretty psyched. We've got water coming up and filling the tank. The pipe that goes from the tank back down to the cabin is actually really pretty thick. It's 1.5 inch poly pipe, and it's 200 psi, so the wall on it is like 1/4 of an inch thick, and it's really stiff and hard to kind of work with. So I'm gonna untie it here, stretch it out, and see if I can't get it to relax a little bit overnight, so that when I come back to work with it, I'm not fighting with the curve. It's kind of unwieldy. Well, it's a beautiful morning. The tank hasn't started filling yet, and so I'm going to try to use it's pretty cold out actually, so I'm going to use the cold temperatures to do the trenching I need to do from over here to here. I can kind of figure that out before I start assembling stuff and before the pump kicks in. I can try to get the input switched around to a newer input before the pump starts, and then I'll get the rest of this sort of assembled. I'm going to almost count on having to go to the hardware store because I've got what I think is the right kit of stuff, but I'm sure I'm going to need something.
We sing, we dance, we fight, and we love.
The trenching wasn't bad at all, and this let me then sort out the input pipe, the output pipe, and the wire for the sensor for the tank full. And I kind of bundled those together so that I could coordinate them in the trench and sort of get them all wrestled out. This poly has sort of memory, so you can see it just kind of wants to stay in its position. So I had to kind of get it put in place and get it in the basic orientation that I was going to need for the trench. Came prepared with a Lego set of PVC pipes, and so I first kind of dry fit everything, cut stuff out, got it kind of framed out, and then I went ahead and glued the joints. And you can see I'm using a union here at the end of the valve, and that'll let me, I'll put a union on bottom and a union on the top, and that'll let me pull the whole column off if I need to change it, fix it, or make any edits to it. And I can shut the tank off and keep the tank full while I'm doing that work. So it's kind of trying to isolate the distribution and input and output stuff from the storage. So this is the part of this that I hope works well. I've got a piece of PVC that a flat topped cap for the PVC, which was kind of hard to find, but I found one. So because they're often domed, and I'll put a domed one on the top, but I'm going to build a tank out of a 4-inch sections of 4-inch pipe, and that tank is going to sit right next to, kind of parallel to this big tank, and then there's pass-throughs on top and bottom between them. And so on this flat cap, I drilled 2 holes, one of them for a boss that's a 1/2 inch. This is a 1/2 inch boss, like a bulkhead boss, and that way I can run up through the tank on the inside. I'll have a dry spot that is the place for the wiring to conduit to go up in there, so I can run the wiring up, and that's the wire that will turn the pump off once this tank is full. And so the sensor will sit up inside this tank. And then this other boss here is 3/4, and it is where the input water will come. And rather than just coming to the bottom, I'll run it up on a riser pipe that goes all the way to the top, so that when the pump turns off at night, that can drain back. It basically there's an air gap, and so that it can drain back, and it won't just drain the whole tank out back down to the well. So I'm going to put these on and start putting this stuff together and building up that stack.
Trusting them is the last thing we should do.
All right, so I got my funny little bottom to this tank, and I've got the bigger one here is the 3/4, and that'll take the barb with the pipe coming in from the well. That'll go all the way up to a riser, and then it'll bubble over the top and start to fall down into this tank and fill it. The smaller thing is just going to be a wire chase, and the wire is just going to go up all the way up, and the sensor will sit up on top to know when the tank is full. And then I need to have a way to get the water out of the tank and heading down to the house, or the cabin. So I've got the next stage of this will be to glue kind of a second bottom on this, and then this will be the output. So I've got the input, the output, and the wire. With the assembly being pretty small, it's easy for me to make good glue joints and get it right, but later you'll see that I kind of get burned by having a bigger assembly that I'm trying to put together and get lined up, and it doesn't quite seal. It's just something I learned using PVC. So now with the manifold for this outer tank done, I could measure how tall to make it to fit and tie into the pipe that goes into the bigger tank. I had to be a little bit careful about the order of things here, because before I glue that pipe in, I need to glue in the 2 riser pipes so that I can kind of sleeve things over. So I kind of glued those in first, got them assembled, and then glued the outer pipe on top of it and started to get a bigger assembly. With that in place, I pulled the union apart on the tank and put the next piece in, which would tie this outer tank to the bigger tank. And this is the last joint that worked well, because I still had a fairly small thing to work with, and I could put the joints together, the large joints together quickly. I found that later it got harder when I was trying to line things up with these big joints. It was also getting hotter outside, which was starting to dry the glue really quickly. Now I can connect the 2 tanks together, and I need to measure how long to make the snout on the upper connection to be sort of plumb and level with the tank. And I didn't bring a level, I forgot one, so I kind of rigged something up with a piece of string and a bolt, worked out just fine, and kind of set up my pipe on the top so that I could measure how far to make it extend. And it didn't have a valve, so it was a little bit different shape. And I was going to use another union up there so I can pull this smaller tank all the way off, and I did manage to throw the plumber's putty into the sand, which was kind of fun, but got this thing out and measured it out. I glued up the upper subassembly and then put it on the tank and measured the pipe that would go between them, which makes up the bulk of the tank. And the unions are they're pretty picky, so I needed to kind of make this a super accurate measurement. And this is kind of where I started to get burned with the glue joints. So I think I had 2 things working against me here for this glue joint that didn't work. One of them was that it was getting really pretty warm out there, and so the glue was drying quicker than I could put it on, and I just needed, put it on more judiciously and also on both sides of the joint. And then the other issue was that I was trying to get this all lined up and really flat and square. And so when I was pushing the joint in, I didn't twist it or anything. I just kind of slid it straight in and was kind of more focused on getting it oriented rather than getting a good seal. So I'll show you the one that didn't work. And it's an easy thing to fix, but it was just something I learned when I did it. And I would certainly do it slightly differently next time. So this is the joint that didn't work quite so well, and I think if I did it again, I would just try to add more glue to it and do it more quickly. Nothing else about it was really bad, and I could certainly twist the joint a little bit, which would help. This is an easy thing to seal, and I'm going to wait. As of the editing of this video, I hadn't quite had the tank full yet, and so I wanted to wait and make sure there was no other joints to work on before I pull the thing and seal it up. But anyway, that was the one that gave me some grief. Moving on, I used the level to get these so that the 2 snouts would be planar with one another, and then I marked both for depth so that they were spaced properly and orientation so that they were twisted correctly, and that made the gluing of the joint a little bit better, and this joint worked quite well. All right, I'm gonna take a break for lunch, and I've got the solar well just kicked in, and it'll probably run harder later, but it's running now, which is great. And to control it, because I need to shut it off while I'm plumbing, I'm gonna just use, this is the wire, the far end of the wire, this goes all the way down to the well pump. So I can just, if I just close these contacts, will go down to the well, and I haven't done the wiring down there, but if I close these contacts and then go down there and hook up the wires down there, it will make the pump think that the tank is full because these are touching, and so then it'll turn the pump off, and so I can use it kind of as a remote control up here while I'm plumbing. Back at the pump, landing these wires was pretty simple because there's no polarity for these wires. It's just an open or closed circuit. And so I landed those 2 wires, tucked everything in. This is something I needed to do anyway to complete this. And then verified that with those 2 wires touching up on the top by the tank, the pump thought that the tank was full, and so it disabled the water for now. And that's just a good way for me to control it from the other side. So with the pump disabled by fooling it into thinking the tank was full, I was able to load the sensor wire on and get it fed all the way through so that it would sit up out of the way and have the sensor up be near where it would needed to measure a full tank. And then I used the unions and went ahead and installed the tank up onto the other tank. There was not a ton of extra 3/4 inch pipe coming up from the well from the 300-foot piece I put in place, but I cut the remainder off and then cleaned it up and installed it on the barb that I had put in the bottom of the small tank and tightened it up with hose clamps. And so that kind of completed the whole official distribution into the tank. I then started working on the output from the tank, and I decided to go ahead and put in a threaded fitting as the first thing coming out because the output could change over time or break or something, and so I wanted it to be something that I could come back to and redo later. So I glued in a threaded fitting and then started building up the output manifold. I knew that when I was done hooking this all up, I was going to be fighting that big, huge piece of poly pipe that goes down to the cabin to get this thing to land and line up. And so I went ahead and added a union here so that I could kind of put that on at the last minute without having to sort of twist a threaded fitting onto it or anything. So another union here just so that it was easily broken down. And then I threaded a temporary plug into that threaded union. All right, I'm up on top of the tank now, and I'm gonna do a couple little things. So this is my sensor wire, and I'm gonna thread that through a kind of a riser pipe that I'll just put on here temporarily just so that I can get, because this should be the well water coming up and out. And so I'm gonna feed my wire through here, and then I'll feed a piece of 4-inch on that so that the water doesn't go all over the place, assuming everything works okay. So I'll glue these in later, but I want to get everything measured and figured out and just test to see if it's working first. Okay, so now I've just got that extended. I'm gonna put this in. And then to turn my pump on, I should be able to just open up these wires. Which will make so now the pump will down on the well will think that it's not full. And I think it takes a minute for it to pump it up the hill here, but we'll wait and see. So it's pumping through about 230 feet of pipe or so to get up to here, and it's coming up about 60 feet. start to see where my leaks are. Looks like I got one here at the Union. There it goes. So I'm going to fill up the tube here, and then I'll crack it open once it starts flowing over the top, mostly just to flush out any garbage that's in there. And then I can leave it, and then I can open up the valve and start filling the tank. So I'll empty it out and flush the stuff out. The next thing to do is to put a little cap on the sensor wire just so that I can't get water down into the sensor wire or bugs can't come up through. So I just have a little cap. I'm going to drill a small hole in it, feed the sensor wire through there, and then get that put in place at its proper height. With that done, I just put a length of 4-inch on there and put the cap on it, just pressure fit it on, and then I buried in the trench a little bit up to where I wanted to be able to keep it open, just so that I could see that everything was dry when I came back a week later. So I just sort of tucking in and cleaning up for this week.
Sometimes we feel hopeless and there's nothing to say. There's nothing wrong with silence and play. We sing, we dance, we fight, and we love.
All right, well, it's been about a week since we were out here. It was sunny up until 2 days ago, and then it's been rainy, and we had a really good sort of soaking rain, which is nice. It's supposed to get nice later today, and so the pump will probably start running again around noon, which is when the sun kind of exposes the panels. And this is the far end of the pipe, and so there's 800 feet of piping up to the tank where we've been working. This is the far end, and I just didn't have hose clamps or pipe clamps for the hose here on the end. And then I've got just a union and a spigot so that we can test the pressure and kind of flush it out and kind of get started. So I'm going to put the clamps on here so that I can load the line without having this thing blow off. And we'll go up there, and I'm really curious to see what the tank looks like. It's been 7 days since we last filmed, and that was when we started filling the tank. So we'll see what it was able to sort of do in terms of 7 days of relatively typical summer weather starting to fill that tank. All right, back up at the tank, and Karen and I have sort of guesses for how much water is going to be in there. She said 200 gallons, and I thought that was a little pessimistic over a week. It seemed to me like before we were getting about 100 gallons a week, so I'm going to go with 500 to 700 gallons. And it's kind of, sometimes you can see on the tank if it's condensing or if there's sort of moisture and dew point, you can just see a hard line where the water is. I can't see that right now, so I'll climb up there when I'm doing stuff and check, and we'll see who was right. The good news is that the fittings and everything that were dripping a little bit when I started are all dry, and that's nice. That's one of the reasons I didn't bury this in. And there is a crazy looking spider here that I'll show you up close. But anyway, I've got just the poly pipe here, And that's really the only thing that I need to put in. And I'm going to put a little kind of a fire hydrant right here so that the wildland fire people can come in and grab water from this if there's an emergency and they need to get it. But I want to show you this crazy spider because it's kind of bizarre. This gives kind of a new definition to the notion of a daddy longleg. I don't know if you can see it, but I'll try to touch it and see if I can get it to move. It's just a crazy looking spider in there. It's my hand, so it's pretty good size, but it's got a little tiny body and really long legs. Haven't seen one like that before. I was trying to come up with a clever way to do water level measurement and haven't really come up with a really good idea yet. So I'll get up here and look and see what we've got for now. It's definitely full across the bottom and it's partway up that first rib, so it's not a ton. It's probably about here to start with, something like that. It's enough to be able to test the pressure from up here. We'll give it a try. So the way I've got this set up, there's two unions that hold this whole pipe on, and so that can come off and go back on, but I can close off the tank. So now the tank is isolated from this white pipe other than up on top. And so that means I've got water in this white pipe from about here down. So I've got a little, probably a few gallons of water that I'll let come out. And then I'm gonna build up my fittings on the end of this union down here, so that I can sort of attach that and remove it pretty easily if I need to change it up. So I'll work on that today, but first I'm just gonna dump this. I'm also gonna put a brick underneath the white pipe here to support it from below so that it got kind of a bigger footprint because it's gonna get heavier as it fills up with water and pulls on that poly pipe or poly tank.
These hands of mine have got some stories to tell. Seen parts of heaven and a whole lot of hell. Headed west to stake a claim in the ground. I got as far as Cripple Creek that night. I met a girl with golden hair and green eyes. Fell in love on the outskirts of town. Hung my hat, figured I'd stick around. Hey, the part of me that longs to hold her at night would bury any man that don't treat her right. I'm gonna love and live and kill and fight with my whole heart till death do us part. There was a man who ran that whole damn town. He thought he owned her and that they'd settle down. Took her back with a Colt 44. I loaded up and rode out into the night. Took out his men and by the dawn's early light left a blood trail up to his porch. Held my breath and I kicked down the door. Down on his knees, he was begging for his life. She looked up at me without a tear in her eye. So I put that gun in her hand. Sometimes it takes a woman to end a man. The same part of me that holds her at night would bury any man that don't treat her right. I'm gonna love and live and kill and fight with my whole heart till death do us part.
All right, well, I got all done and realized I didn't have one piece today, and that is a valve that can go here, which is just going to be a hose bib. I went down to the pump building, which is the system we're replacing, and rated it for a valve. So I've got a valve here that I'll put in here, and then I've got the sort of fire, the setup for the fire department if they should ever need to get water. And then while I was sitting at lunch, I got curious. I was like, how many gallons of water in 550 feet of 1.5-inch pipe? How much water am I going to take to fill that pipe? And it turns out it's about 0.092 gallons per foot. So at 550 feet, that works out to about 50 gallons. So it's kind of interesting that it'll take the first 50 gallons of the tank here just to charge the pipe. And then it'll probably burp out some air and stuff. And then we can start looking at what the pressure is. And then we have another 8 feet to gain of pressure once we fill the tank. So the pressure will increase a little bit down there once we get the tank full. All right, the moment of truth to see if any of this holds water. So I'm going to open this valve, and what I'm hoping it does is it's going to fill from here. This will be all locked with air, but I can bleed the air, and then it should start sending water down to the cabin. And since that pipe is 550 feet long, and we've now learned 50 gallons in size, it should take some water and probably bubble and gurgle as it does. So we'll see what we get here. I hear water. And I hear a fair amount of bubbling, so I think it's bubbling up out of the pipe. I don't see any leaks so far. And then it's probably also going to charge a bunch of air, so there'll be air pressure down in the pipe down lower, and so when I bleed it down there, it'll probably leak some of that out. So that's either full, equalized, or the tank ran out of water, one or the other. Not sure, we'll see. We'll go down and see the other side. Before I leave, I can hear it bubbling now, so I think the air is sort of bubbling down through the pipe and filling the pipe. I can also open this up and bleed the air out here. So now we've kind of bled this out. All right, so let's see. So plumbing the well, putting in new solar panels on top of the well, digging a temporary trench or permanent trench of 280 feet up to the tank, digging 600 feet from the tank down to here, putting in a foundation, concrete block, core, a cap, a structure, a roof, and plumbing, and we have hopefully water coming out here. We'll see what we get. There we go. There's not a ton of pressure, and I'm assuming there's air in the line, and also the tank may not be completely full. But at least we got some water coming out, and it's making the circuit. That's pretty exciting. So we'll go check the pump and see how things are doing, but I can wash my hands now. So this tank full. So I think the mystery of why it wasn't as full as maybe I thought it would be is because the tank sensor that is sensing for when the tank is full is registering as tank full. That probably is due to just the wires up in the top here, which I'm going to splice in and put the actual sensor in today. So hopefully that remedies it, but I should be able to free up those wires and the pump should kick in. We just got sun and got soaked walking through the grass to get there because everything's super heavy laden with rain. But I'll get up there, pop that off, and see if we can start getting it filling, and then it hopefully will start to charge the tank. All right, so I got the sensor wires in here, and I had them just sort of bundled into a wad, so they may have been touching. So we'll see what we get. They don't look to be touching, but they were kind of in the water. So we'll see if this open, if we don't get the pump to kick in. It's sunny enough that it should. And while I'm up here, I'm gonna wire this in permanently. So we'll give this a minute and see what it does. And if this doesn't do it, then there's possibly the wires down below may have been shorted. But I hear it. I think I hear it gurgling now. We'll see what it does. I'll give it a minute. The well sensor is disabled down at the pump, and I can hear the thing. It's pumping really well now. So that was disabling it, and I don't quite know why that is. But I'm gonna wire up this sensor. This is the original sensor, and so I'll stick it in there, figure out the wires, and then I'm gonna have to chase down the wire and figure out where I've got some sort of problem with the wire. But I've built myself a little electronics workbench here up on top of the tank. Got the solar power running the soldering iron, which is kind of nice, and I'll go ahead and splice this in, heat shrink it, and get it all tucked in so that I can at least put the sensor together on this side. And you can, I don't know if you can hear the water, but it's running really strong right now, which is great. Okay, I'll explain this a little bit. If this is the sensor here, and if it gets submerged, so there's a little, I think it's just if there's contact between the two pieces in there, it'll consider the tank full. So I probably should make a little thing to organize these, but the water, as you probably saw, bubbles up out of here when the pump's running, and it's kind of cloudy today, so it's coming and going, and then it goes down and fills the tank. And if the tank makes it all the way up to this level, it's going to hit that sensor and clip it off. And then I've got this little snout that I made. I just cut a hole in there and threaded this in and glued it. That's kind of an overflow, and that diameter is bigger than that of the input pipe. And I do need to put a screen on this or something so I don't get bugs in there, but that will just sit over here. I don't think I'll glue that yet because things aren't working flawlessly yet, and so I'll kind of leave it as is, but that'll keep the water from splashing around, and I've got a lid for it. So I'll just leave it like that for now. I'm gonna go and see if I can't find where there may be a break in the wire or a place where the wires are shorted out. It seems to be, like I've got that all set up now, so I can go back down to the pump and connect it back up and see if it thinks the tank is full. If it does, then there's something probably in the wiring and probably just right where I was working in the last couple of days, so I can kind of look for that. So anyway, that sort of tucks in this end of it, and it is, I'm impressed, like today, the weather's coming and going and it's fairly cloudy, and it is still kicking in and pumping off and on as the sun comes out. So that's a good sign, and it's starting to fill the tank, and that's why there wasn't a whole lot of water in here, as I think all week the pump thought the tank was full. Okay, so I'm back down at the pump and everything's working fine. The tank full is not lit, and I've got the maximum power point running. So the pump is running right now, and so I'll crack the case open here, turn it off, and hook the sensor. Now that I've got the sensor wired in and everything, I'll hook it up one more time and see if it causes a problem. And if it causes a problem, I'm going to need to chase down the wire, and I don't have a voltmeter, so I'll probably wait until I come back and use a voltmeter and do that, because the easiest way to do that is to go somewhere in the middle and sort of test each side and see if it's above or below that and find out where the problem is. So I'm gonna turn this off, and then I've got these are the wires coming in from the pump up above, or from the tank sensor. So I'm just gonna drop these into the tank high sensing spot on the panel here. I'm allergic to something. All right, well, I waited a bit and I've tucked it all in, and it's pumping. Doesn't say full, well's not low. It's a really good sign. So I'm gonna let this run. We're gonna be back out in a few days, so I'm gonna let it run for a few days. Can check that hole up there where I've got all the plumbing in there and make sure that there's no drips or nothing, no wetness, and then I can fill it back in. Make sure that this is going, and then I think that explains why we didn't get much water over the week that we were gone, because we had about probably 5 really good sunny days in there. I would have expected it to bring in a couple 100 gallons a day at very least, and it didn't look like it had done that, but it was showing tank full. And I might write to them, the company that makes this, and just ask if there's something about, if I was using the switch up, the wires up there to kind of turn the pump on and off as I was wiring things up last week, and maybe that confused the controller, because I did sort of stop it and start it now, and that may have sort of reset it. So it's working great. We're pumping up to the tank's filling, and we've got water running all the way down to the cabin spigot now. So we'll give it a week, make sure there's no leaks or anything, and then we can kind of check off the water supply. We returned a few days later to sunny weather, a filling tank, which meant that the sensor problem was resolved and things were working well. We brought a hose along, and we sort of just bootstrapped the water supply into the old pump building, and we raided some parts off of there. The pump's fried, so it didn't really matter anyway. So I rated the pressure gauge mostly is what I was interested in. Put some plumbing in for the hose, and then we were able to sort of charge the cabin with the pressurized water from the tank kind of through this hose. And it was just a way to sort of test the pressure and see what it looked like, and super easy to hook up and easy to take out with only a few PVC fittings.
That's possible.
Yeah. The first effort was sort of underwhelming, to say the least, and we were only getting 1 or 2 psi down at the meter, even though we did get a little bit of pressure, and we were able to test it in the house, and it was making it through and everything. So the first thought I had was that we just needed to bleed air out of the line. So I let the hose run for a while and see if it would sort of burp out air and get over any bellies in the line. And I did that. It didn't seem to make a big difference. So after 10 videos and quite a bit of work, this is confusing. It's not working very well. I've got water down here, but I just don't have a ton of pressure. When I open this up, I get pretty nominal pressure, and I can cap it off. There's not a lot of pressure underneath that, and I'm not sure why. So it's been about 5 days since I was last out here, and if you recall, I was getting poor output from this. It was just not very high pressure, and I think we're about 60 feet below the tank now, and the tank continues to fill. So I'm going to try something today. I think what's going on is that I've got an air bubble in the line. The line is like largely downhill from that whole way, just looking at it, but there may be a bubble in there that is basically kind of got some bellies, and so the water's just sort of leaking over the top and then to the next bay. And I've got a 3/4 inch output here, which isn't a very big orifice for output, and so I think what's happening is it's just gating it and it's kind of keeping that bubble in place. So I'm going to go up, I'm going to shut off the valve at the top. The line holds about 50 gallons of water, so I'll let that, whatever's in there, I'll let that out. And then I'm going to put a valve in line here so that I can break this union off and have a full 1.5 inch dump and basically really try to just purge the line. And I'm going to put in a fire plug down here anyway, and I'll be able to use that in the future for that. It's kind of instructive that says I kind of should have that just for kind of maintaining the line. But I'm going to see if that works, because I can't think of any other reason why I wouldn't get better pressure here than what I'm getting up at the tank, where it's only this much depth. All right, I'm back up at the tank. I hear it running. It's definitely pumping right now. And unfortunately, I've got a little tiny leak. It's not very much, but I do have a little leak here that I'm gonna have to eventually deal with. For now, my goal is to figure out first how much water I've got. So I'm up to about here now, which is it's good. It probably doubled. So that's about 5 days water there. And that looks like that's about 500 gallons. So it's picking up water at roughly 100 gallons a day, which is what we thought. I'm gonna try shutting off the valve here, and I think what's gonna happen is it's gonna fill this pipe all the way up and then overflow into the tank and just keep filling the tank while I'm working on the lower side, but it may turn off the pump when it gets up towards the sensor. So we'll see what it does up there. And it also may get full because it's been running for a couple hours now. But I'm gonna go ahead and close this, and I can let it keep pumping. And now when I dump the water out of the line, I'm thinking out loud as I do this, it's gonna keep pumping while I do that. I may do this in the morning. All right, well, the pump turned off because the well went low because it's a bright sunny day, which is a good thing. So now I can go ahead and put my valve on this. Having a valve down on this end will be useful too, just because I can then mess with the plumbing. It's basically like a supply from the utility. I can turn it off and break the union and add things on the other end with it off, but the line's still charged. So once I get the line charged, I shouldn't have to do this over and over again. I got this fitting on here, I had it turned off, turned it back on. The pump was running again when I was back up there. I was doing some other stuff, and it was filling up the pipe and it was bubbling and stuff. So I'm hoping this is fairly spectacular. Here's my guess. I think it's going to bubble and gurgle, spit a little, and then I'm hoping it kind of locks in and gets a really good stream going. Then I can cut that off, and I think in doing that, I will have then filled the whole line with water. Then I'll hook back up our pressure and see if we don't have a better, I think we were just sitting on an air cushion. Let's see what we get. There it goes. See if we get some sputter. Okay, this is what I was hoping for. I feel like I'm on Caddyshack. So now I think we're at the pressure we want. I think the line's full. I can feel little bubbles coming in, but that's quite a bit of water coming out now. That's a lot better pressure. Uh-oh. Now I have no way to stop it, so now I'm in trouble. I'm gonna sprint up there and get it. All right, 3 hose clamps. It's amazing how tight those things were and it still blew off. So that's, I think, called it's like a, what's it called? I forget what the name is. There's a name for, it's like a water plug in a line. It's like it'll come to me and I'll let you know. Anyway, I think what I got to be careful of is closing it off and then opening it up when it starts to develop a big suction, like a siphon, and then it sends an air slug through there. And it's hammering is what I guess the term in piping would be. That's the term I was thinking of. So I got to watch out for hammering. Once it's all full, I should be good, but I'm going to probably, this time I'll get it flowing like I did last time. Still think there's enough water up in the tank. And then I will stop it and let it sort of bubble and gurgle out and hopefully air out up on the top, and then slowly leak it out down here. It's definitely going to have better pressure. You can see that once we got the air out of there, it really built. So I'll head back up, get my exercise today. It's kind of a beautiful day to do this and kind of fun to get splashed a little bit. And I'm glad you got to see that on camera. All right, here goes round 2 of Steve's excellent water adventure. I've got this sealed. I didn't really have good hose clamps, and I think this pipe is so thick. It's like it's darn near a 1/4 inch thick. I think it's so thick it's actually hard to compress with hose clamps. So I might look into getting a better clamping mechanism because I don't want hammering in the thing to blow it apart underground. But this time I'm going to try a little bit different. I was kind of feathering it and getting it to spray really far, and I think I was developing a bunch of air pressure in there, which was sending kind of a water plug through. So this time I'm going to get it flowing really well, stop, wait for 5 minutes and see if the bubbles don't kind of work their way up and out, and maybe do a couple pushes like that to see if I can't get it to purge as best I can, and then I'll hook it up and see what pressure we're getting. So here it goes. Been a couple minutes, see if that made any difference. It's better. Let it bubble up again. All right, a couple more minutes, see if that bubble cleared. That seems pretty solid now. So I'll try hooking it up to the pressure pump and see what we've got, or the pressure gauge. Here we go. Look at that, 28 PSI. That is awesome. All right, well, mystery solved. That was really cool to see that work. And we've got, right now it's sitting at 28 PSI. The tank is pretty low because I drained it all out when I was messing with everything. So the tank's gonna raise another probably 6 feet. And so that gives you 1.5 PSI. So I can watch the gauge and kind of probably learn to know how high the tank is based on the PSI reading. This is obviously just a temporary thing. I'm gonna be dismantling that pump building and moving it away. We're gonna kind of use it as a temporary structure while we tear down the cabin. And so until we tear down the cabin, we'll run this hose out and use the plumbing in it while we can. Then we're gonna migrate the plumbing into that little pump building and kind of use it as a plumbed outhouse while we're doing construction. And so we'll have a place to wash our hands and use the bathroom and stuff in there. And we might even throw a little shower on the outside. Anyway, so this wraps up pretty much the water supply. I would say that, you know, we're good to this point, to this valve, and everything we do downstream from here now is kind of part of the, you know, the cabin structure and everything. So as we migrate into that, I'll do a couple more updates on this because I still want to do a purification system that I'm going to put up on the roof of the tank once it gets full. I've got a little bit of leakage in that pipe, and so I may show you that. I'll probably pull that out and either rebuild it or try to seal it. And then I'm going to build a vault down here that's going to be kind of another hydrant and a valve box and the PSI reading and everything kind of in a separate box, almost like you'd have at your curb in a municipal supply, so that I can turn that off, work on the plumbing in the cabin, do that sort of thing, and then turn it back on. So this has been a big project. I didn't think this was going to be a big component. Like when I looked at building the garage, rebuilding the cabin, and the water supply, I would have thought that the water supply was really incidental, but it's actually taken quite a bit of work, and I've learned a ton on it. I hope you had fun watching it. I'm going to put together a video that breaks this down and kind of gives you all the costs and everything, and I'll also outline each step of the way, because I broke this into individual steps like plumbing and sheet metal and, you know, foundation and things like that, so that you may pick and choose from those and pick the parts that you want to look more into if you're just starting with this video. It's all part of a playlist called the Cabin Water Supply, and you can look at that, or I think it's off-grid solar water supply. And it's pretty neat to have the sun pumping, it looks like it's pumping about 3 or 4 hours a day right now in the summer. And the well runs low, it recharges, it's filling the tank. Once the tank's full, I'll make sure that that measurement, that thing is cutting off where it should, and I can move that sensor to adjust the high water mark. And then it should generally be full when we come here, and we'll bleed it down and treat it like a battery, and then it'll recharge while we're gone. It's very exciting. Thanks again for watching, and until I see you next, I'll be out building. I'm gonna go take a shower.